Quilting curved echo lines can really highlight individual blocks of your quilt. It's not only easy, it's a lot of fun. Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from quiltingismytherapy.com, and welcome to the third video in the Arcs, Curves, and Points with Rulers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. Throughout this video series, we have been learning how to use these types of rulers in a lot of different ways to quilt the exclusive panel I designed for the series. We've already covered a lot of content in the last two videos, from how to quilt motifs with our rulers, how to use them in spaces that aren't quite the right size, as well as how to create some really cool designs for the blocks on our panel. Now we're going to keep on going by learning how to combine rulers to create some pretty cool designs. I'm going to show you how to quilt it on a sewing machine and a long arm, and share some tips so that you're as successful as possible with the designs that we're learning. And it's not too late to quilt along with me on the custom panel I designed for the series. It's a perfect way to practice the designs that we've been learning, and when you're done, you get to step back and see a beautiful finished quilt. To learn more about it and the coordinating products, all you have to do is click the link in the description box below or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. So let's get to it. For the first design, I'm going to show you a variation of echoing, which not only looks great, it's also really efficient to quilt. First, we're going to start with this shape right here. And what I want to do is quilt a line that swings out, echoes aside, and then comes back to that point. It's a little bit different than your traditional echo because they're going to actually touch at the corners. There's a couple reasons I'm doing that. One, I like how it draws attention to the corner of the blocks, but it also helps me move my way through the area more efficiently. Since the lines of this design touch the corners of the block, if I can end up on the opposite side from where I started, it's going to leave me set up perfectly to go right into the next block. So not only does it look great, but it's a little bit more efficient to quilt as well. So starting from one corner, I'm going to position my ruler so that needle stop is around the foot. I'm going to angle it just a bit and then quilt along it till I get directly below that outer point. Then I'm going to pause and reposition my ruler and quilt an arced line down to the other side. And then again, this time I'm going to reposition the ruler so it's snug against the foot, then angle it towards that other point, putting it in the middle of my needle stop, and I'm going to quilt along that curve. Now, if you're working with an arc ruler that doesn't have a needle stop, it's totally fine. I'm just going to position it so I have a 1/4 inch spacing in between that corner and the ruler. And there I have the first line of my design, that arc that goes out to a point and continues on to the other side. And that was so much fun. Let's add some more echoes. So from this point, I'm going to quilt another arc that angles out to about 1 inch or so from the previously quilted point. Then repositioning the ruler and quilting my way back to the opposite corner. So each successive echo line is using the previous line as a guide, and I can add as many or as few of these lines as I want. And here I have some beautiful arched lines that fill in that block nice and consistently. But if I want to switch up the look of the design, I can quilt those arcs so they're closer together and add some different filler on the inside. I just love how with quilting you can make it as easy or as complex as you want. So this time, instead of positioning my ruler so it's 1 inch or so away from that other corner, I'm going to position it a little bit closer to that outer point. Quilting along my curve, stopping when I'm directly below that other corner. Then doing the same on the other side. Repositioning the ruler, looking to that corner, making sure it's a 1/4 inch away from the ruler, and then quilting that line. Now this time when I quilt my echo line, I'm going to quilt it so it's closer to the previous one, about a 1/4 inch or so away. Again, stopping when I get directly below that other corner, and doing the same on the other side. Now quilting 3 sets of curves is going to help me end up on the opposite side from where I started, setting me up perfectly for the next block. But if I want to add a little bit more detail to this block, I can pause right here and add a filler design within that area. I'm quilting a wishbone in this area because I like how it adds that curvy look to it, but you could go super crazy and add some pebbles or keep it nice and simple with a meandering line. No matter what you put in here, it's going to look great. And even though I finished that block, I know that my next one is over here. So I'm going to use a little bit of traveling along the edge to get me to that point. I love how it gets me right to that next block so I can continue on without having to tie off and start a new line of quilting. Now in this next example, we're going to switch it up just a little bit and add some echo lines on the top and the bottom of the block. So I'm going to quilt a couple arcs just like we've already seen. And what's nice is the more echo lines you add, the shorter they get. So there I have the first part of my design, 3 of those echo lines quilted so beautifully. Now I'm going to add another echo line, except instead of looking to this side of the block, I'm going to look to this side of the block and quilt it so it angles out about a ½ inch or so away from that point and onto the other side. I mean, it's the same basic idea, it just gives you a slightly different look. And what that's going to give me is a set of echo lines up here, one down here, and a nice little unquilted area in between. And that's where I'm going to add some more quilting just to really make those echo lines pop. And like I said, it gives it a slightly different look, and that pop of quilting right here just makes those arc lines really stand out. Now, as you're working through several blocks, chances are at some point you're going to find yourself not where you want to be. At that point, just pause and ask yourself, where do I need to go and how can I get there? Whether it's adding another arc line, adding some filler, even a little bit of traveling along the edge of the block, whatever you need to do to move on. As I'm working through my quilt tops, I like to quilt as much of the area as I can while I'm there. So that means sometimes I'm working on several blocks at one time. As I'm working with that efficient echoes design, once I finish a block, it's easy to go ahead and quilt another design while I'm in that area. It's not difficult to do, but it does take one more thing to think about. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on the long arm. Starting on one corner of the block, I'm going to position the ruler so that's about a ½ inch away from the next corner. Now, as you quilt along the ruler, be sure to reposition your hands as necessary. If you find that the ruler is just a little too small for the quilt block, you can actually extend it just a little bit and make it fit. Try quilting along the ruler for a little bit, repositioning, and repeating. This is basically just taking that ruler and stretching it out a little bit to fit the block. And since the arcs get smaller with each echo line, you can resume using the ruler as normal. The hardest part about quilting these arcs on a long arm is the fact that you're going to have to get comfortable with quilting with that ruler in all different directions. I know I've said it before, but it's so very true. As you work through the different positions, be sure to pause, take your time, and reposition your hands as necessary. And as you're quilting, press down on the ruler firmly without pressing too hard. We want to keep the ruler in place, but we don't want to push so hard that it's hard to move the machine. I promise the more you practice this, the easier it'll get. Now for a pop of texture, you can try quilting a filler design in the unquilted area. Sure, it's going to take a little bit longer, but man, it looks so great on the quilts. When quilting with rulers on a long arm quilting machine, of course we're using a ruler base underneath the quilt. That gives us a nice sturdy platform for quilting with our rulers. And since I like to alternate between quilting with rulers and regular free motion quilting, I leave my ruler base on all the time. Now this dense filler really does make those arc lines stand out, but of course you could leave this out if you prefer. Remember, you can make this design as complex or as easy as you'd like. And just as we saw on the sewing machine, quilting those arcs so that they touch the corners of the blocks means that I can efficiently work through that quilt. Now, once I finish this block, it's easy to go ahead and pause this design and use my dot ruler to quilt it in the block above it. Since the design returns back to itself, it means I'll be set up to continue on with my blocks. I'm going to start by positioning the ruler so that it's centered on that quilt block. Then, carefully holding the ruler in place, I'm going to quilt along the first 3 sides. And depending on the direction you're quilting, be sure to pause and reposition your hands as necessary so that you can maintain control of the ruler. Now, before quilting that last part of the ruler, I'm going to rotate it ever so slightly so that the starting point is about a ¼ inch away from the edge of the ruler. Then I'll quilt along it, giving me that gorgeous, curvy, pointy dot shape. Then from that point, I can resume quilting my efficient echoes as we've already done. While it may seem tricky at first, being able to fill in those areas while you're there just makes it just a little bit more efficient to work through it. Now, even though we've quilted that dot shape in the previous block, I'm going to come back later and add some echoing above it. But for now, I'm resuming with my efficient echoes quilting the next block. And as we've already seen on the sewing machine, you can echo different sides of the block. For instance, you can echo the top for some and echo the bottom for others, and then add filler in the rest of the area. Of course, you know that you can skip that altogether. But no matter what you quilt in the block, as long as you end up on the opposite side from where you started, you'll be able to work your way through that quilt as efficiently as possible. I don't mind jumping back and forth between designs, especially when it means I can handle an area when I'm right there. But if this seems like too much to keep track of, you can totally go about it differently. You can quilt all your arcs first and then come back and add the other shapes, or you can mix it up like I do. There is really no wrong way to go about it. It really is whatever makes you feel more comfortable, and the more you work with these designs, the more you'll find out what you like. Now that I've finished with that row, it's time to come back and fill in the rest of the block. We know I love the look of echoing, so I'm going to quilt curves that echo the top of the block, using traveling along the edge to get to the next echo line. While you may have to hold that ruler in some unexpected ways, it's totally fine as long as you have control. then, if you really want to show off your ruler quilting skills, you can fill in the rest of the block with a different design. Obviously, it's going to take a lot longer to quilt, but man, it's going to look amazing. No matter how you approach the quilting on your quilt, there are so many design options available to you. And whichever one you choose is going to look great on your quilts. Now, up to this point, we've been efficient with our quilting by choosing designs that help us end opposite from where we start. But there's actually another way you can go about doing it. Instead of quilting one part of the design and then the echoes, we can actually do them both at the same time. To do this, we're going to add in a shape while quilting our echo lines for a design that fills in the whole block without starting a new line of quilting. It's not difficult, but it does take just a little bit more thinking through. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to start by echoing the top side of my block by positioning the ruler so that it's parallel to the side of the block, and then quilting along it till I get just inside that outer point. Now normally I would reposition my ruler and quilt the other side of my echo, but for right now I'm going to pause and quilt a circle so it fills in that area right here. So I'm going to grab my Shelly ruler, which helps me quilt those beautiful circles, and place it so the needle stop is around the foot. Then I'm going to take a moment and make sure it's centered on the block, and I have at least a 1/4 inch clearance on the side here. Once I love how it's placed, I'm going to quilt along the ruler to the other side. From there, I'm going to reposition the ruler to the other side, making sure that it's in the right place. Basically, I want to see that that start point is right in the center of the needle stop. Then I'm going to quilt along the ruler, returning to my starting point. From here, I can resume my echo line by just positioning my ruler and quilting to the other side of the block. Doing this allows me to quilt the echo line and the circle without having to start a new line of quilting, making it nice and efficient. Now in this example, I quilted one echo line because I knew if I quilted more than that, there wouldn't be enough space for my circle. But for a more echo heavy design, we can add more echo lines and then use our Smiley ruler to quilt some arcs out to the bottom. I've decided I'm going to quilt 2 echo lines. So I'm going to quilt the first one as normal, and it's during the second one that I'm going to stop halfway through and quilt my other shape. Now that I've reached the center of that second echo line, I'm going to stop and quilt some curves that go out to the bottom and back. By positioning my ruler around the needle stop and angling it towards the bottom, again making sure I have a 1/4 inch clearance on the side because there is that 1/4 inch between the needle and the edge of the foot. So if my ruler is all the way up against the side of the block, that means my quilting is going to go over it by a 1/4 inch. So I'm making sure that I don't do that. And depending on how motivated you are, you can add some more designs within that area or just leave it unquilted and move along. And for now, I'll leave it unquilted, which I know kind of surprises me because I am the queen of quilting it to death. So I'm just going to finish my last echo line and finish the block. So in this example, I have my 2 echo lines, my beautiful arc kind of petal shape that was all quilted without starting and stopping a new line of quilting. But you may notice that I ended up on the same side of the block that I started on. If I'm trying to work my way from block to block to block, the idea would be to end on the opposite side. And when that happens to me, I just use traveling along the edge of the block to get me to the other side, or echoing, or really anything I can do to get to that spot. So I can travel along the outer corner of the block, I could travel along this side of the block, but just for fun, I think I'm going to throw some pebbles within here to get me to the other side. Now of course, this is way over the top, you definitely don't have to do this. Like I've said before, this is truly a choose-your-own quilting adventure. You can make it as complicated or as easy as you prefer. Now, let's see how to do this on the long arm. So we're going to start by quilting arcs that echo the top of our block. Starting about a 1/2 inch away from the corner, positioning the ruler and quilting along the curve, stopping just below the next point. Then repositioning and quilting to the opposite side. Then I'm going to travel along the edge of the block and quilt the first part of the next echo line. I'm going to pause here, and before moving on, I'm going to quilt my circle using the Shelly ruler, positioning the needle stop around the foot and ensuring that the ruler is centered in the block. Then I'm going to quilt along the curve to the next side. Now take your time as you quilt along the ruler, repositioning your hands if necessary. So from here, I'm going to flip the ruler to the other side, check that it's centered, and quilt back to the starting point, creating my beautiful circle. Once that's done, I can finish quilting the echo line to the other side of the block. And as you're quilting your quilts, you can leave that circle as it is, or add even more designs on the inside. I'm going to use a Shelly ruler to add some more curvy detail inside that circle. By placing the ruler around the foot and rotating it until the center reference line is touching the previously quilted line. Then I'm going to quilt along that curve, stopping when I hit the edge of the circle. Then I'm going to do it again, placing the ruler against the foot and rotating the ruler until the reference line is on the quilting. Quilting along the curve, and then repeating that to quilt my next curve. Now for the last curve, I'm going to adjust the ruler so that it's about 1/4 inch away from where I started, and then quilt back to that point. We're basically just using part of the Shelly ruler to create our curves in the block. And I really love how you can use the same ruler to do so many different designs. Sometimes it's a little tricky to do this, where you're starting one design, pausing, quilting another one, and then going back to the first one. I totally don't mind switching between them, but like I've said before, if you find this tricky, you could totally go about it a different way. Quilt all your echo lines and then your circle, or just go with the dot design that I showed you earlier. For a slightly different variation to the echoing, we can change up the direction to make a design that might be just a little bit easier to quilt. So in this block right here, instead of echoing the top side of the block, I'm going to quilt my arcs so that they angle away from the block and then come up to that point. And depending on how sharp I want the curve, I could use the smaller part of Smiley or I could use the larger one. Both would look beautiful. But I'm going to position the ruler and angle it so that I end up about 1/2 inch or so inside that outer corner. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side, quilting that arc that goes away from the side and ends opposite from where I started. I'm trying to end about 1/2 inch or so away from the corner. It's kind of creating that nice arch shape that kind of angles out towards the top and onto the other side. And of course, we know that we can add more echoing if we'd like to really build up that shape. I love how a little thing like changing up the direction of the arcs can give you a totally different looking design. The designs we've learned in this video have all been about efficiently quilting your way through the quilt. If that's the case, just focus on quilting each block and moving on in a way that makes sense to you. As you get more and more comfortable with quilting with rulers, then you can start thinking about how to work your way through the quilts in that efficient manner. But whether you go with the efficient echoes, whether you add the filler or not, or throw in other shapes while you're quilting, the main idea is that you get comfortable with quilting with those rulers in all different directions. Now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom panel I designed for the series, fill in the area highlighted in red with the designs of your choice. You could try quilting the designs we learned in this tutorial or come up with your own design variations. And as always, I've put together a free downloadable PDF with quilting diagrams and tips so that you're successful with the designs we've learned in this video. Or be sure to check out our expanded resource PDF with even more step-by-step diagrams, even more quilted examples, and even more tips. It's the perfect way to make sure you're successful with the designs that we're learning throughout the series. To learn more about either one of those, just click the link in the description box below, or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. Well, I'll be back soon with the next video in the series where we're going to learn how to combine rulers to create some complex looking designs in the background areas of our quilts. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.